What's happening is Len Davis with Pangeality Productions, and I'm up here on Fur Island near Conway, Washington, or Mount Vernon, really close to the Skagit River Valley, or up here in here. We're pretty close to the ocean. This zone right here is surrounded in two sides by two forks of the Skagit River, and on another side the Whidbey Island Naval Base is close to here. So despite being this incredibly beautiful farmland, you have these warplanes doing formations over us, which is kind of ironic. But I'm out here on Dry Slough Farm, which is adjacent to Rain Song Farm. This is actually Dry Slough Orchard. And I'm here with Dennis. What's your last name, Dennis?
Dennis O'Neill.
Dennis O'Neill on this beautiful farm that's got some of the most killer fruit that I've been munching on all morning. So I wanted to talk to Dennis about his fruit trees and about grafting trees. Dennis, where are we?
So we're about 8 miles south of Mount Vernon, and we're kind of in between Conway and LaConner.
And this is some of the most fertile farmland in the world, apparently, huh?
Well, this was Skagit Delta land. So as the river forked, for thousands of years, this was flooded, and it left delta soil that is some of the best in the world. Amazing.
And we're here on your farm. Tell me a little bit about it.
So we've had this ground for about 20 years now, and it's been a delight to be able to work with such good ground.
Nice.
Just to the west of us, there's a slough, and we're an organic farm, so that's a boundary on one side, and we have the road on this side. So we have some kind of natural boundaries that make it a little easier to keep it organic.
Nice. So I should say that I'm out here doing some work today with New Roots Organics, which is a organic produce delivery company in Seattle. Dry Slough Orchard and Rain Song Farm have been working with New Roots Organics for a long time, and we're out here to sort of take a look at where a bunch of the produce that Seattleites and other people in the Seattle region, where it all begins.
And we're glad to have you.
Nice. So you've got how many different varieties out here? I mean, it's primarily pears, yeah?
These are all Japanese Asian pears, and we have currently 5 varieties. We had more, but over years we've kind of whittled it down to the ones that grow the best, are most disease resistant, and easiest to sell.
Cool. And what are those varieties?
So we have Shinseki, which are the yellow ones. We have Yongi, which are kind of a brown. Chojuro, another brown one. Kosui, like a light tan. Mm-hmm. And Mishirasu, which are these right over here, which tend to be quite a bit larger than everything else.
And your trees are just dripping with fruit right now.
Well, this has been a really good year for set. So in April, when the blossoms are out, the determination of how much fruit you have is really how many of those blossoms turn into little fruitlets. And that's based on how warm the afternoon temperatures get. In this coastal situation, there are years when we don't have enough heat, and then you have a little something that looks like a piece of fruit and it drops off the tree. So it's not a matter of frost, it's a matter of do you have warm enough afternoons. And 55 degrees or so is about the breaking point. Anything, if you have too many days below that, your corresponding yield is reduced quite a bit.
And you're telling me that with the fruit so abundant on your trees right now that represents for every piece of fruit you've taken away 2?
In some cases more, depending on variety. So in some varieties you have to thin maybe 3 or 4 to every piece of fruit that you leave on the tree, or you break the branches just from the weight of all those little pieces of fruit. Mm-hmm. To have commercial fruit, you have to thin so that the fruit sizes up. And in this year, I was not very successful with that with Kosui. Some sized up and some remained too small. So wow. It was a matter of just being tougher at the thinning time, very early thinning time, because of the set this year.
Tell me a little bit about grafting trees and sort of you know, developing rootstock and how these trees perform over the long term, not just on an individual season basis. But what are you doing here?
So this here is the rootstock. So this rootstock is Betulafolia, and it's a very common one for Asian pears. The rootstock determines a lot of things like frost resistance and some disease resistance kinds of things. Also size and lots of different stuff. So the rootstock's really important. And when you've got a piece of rootstock that's a healthy piece of rootstock and you want to start a new tree, you can bud graft onto a piece of rootstock. And when you take a bud graft, you're taking something that is just a bud on, so like this right here is a bud, and you'd take a knife and just cut the bud out right there, and from that little piece you'd insert it into the bark of the rootstock. So a bud graft, you can start a new tree from one bud. And in fact, that's where this tree came from. This was a bud graft that I did a couple of years ago right on a piece of rootstock. So right here, this is the rootstock, and from right there, that's the new tree.
Wow.
Now the other way to start, or the other way to change varieties, is if you have a kind that you want to switch from one variety to another, you take and you cut the old tree where you want to start the new tree, and you insert pieces of scion wood about this long, so a piece like this. So you'd cut that off, and you'd sharpen the end and insert it inside the bark, and then you wrap it and seal it with like electrical tape, and then you put wax over the cut surfaces, and from that you can start new trees. You can change the variety from one tree to the next. So an example of that is right here. So this was a tree that got grafted onto from an old variety to change to a new variety, and in fact this whole row did, because we were going from a variety that was having problems with Pseudomonas, and Pseudomonas was gradually killing trees. So what we wanted to do was switch it over, and this is Chojuro, and Chojuro is a more resistant tree to Pseudomonas, and Pseudomonas gets in the bark, and it's kind of like endemic in the tree. So over time it can kill trees.
What's it like for you having these warplanes buzzing over your orchard all day?
Well, this is kind of ironic because I now live on Whidbey Island, and actually we have less jet noise at my house than we do here. But see, we're really not that far from Whidbey Island if you go straight across the water. To get to my house, though, it takes 35 minutes of driving, where you'd probably be there way quicker by boat.
So, Dennis, to back up for a second here, you used to be a high school teacher before you became a farmer?
Well, actually, I taught elementary school and middle school. Middle school was a
doozy.
It was a lapse in judgment on my part. I wasn't all that well suited to it. I really enjoyed teaching, though. It was a great career to have, and I'd recommend it to anybody.
Nice. So then you retired and decided to
I retired after 30 years of teaching, but I had started the orchard about 15 years before I retired. So there were years when I don't know how I was able to actually do both. In a year like this with this kind of set, I probably wouldn't have been able to do it. So the set really determines everything, and we had a great set this year, and then you have to go back like 4 years before you have this kind of set. You know?
So how many trees do you have here roughly?
We've got about 1,000.
And your average tree is how old?
See, that's a hard question to answer, because all of these rows that have wire, you know, the trellised trees have all been changed from one variety to another. So the
through
age
grafting.
of the tree. Yeah, so the age of the tree is, this part of the tree is way older than this part of the tree.
And this black tube here is where the irrigation comes from?
Yeah, so this is drip irrigation, and we don't have to use it much, but when we get to about the middle of July, you can see that, and just by changing the level it started to drip here, but that's the emitter. So it drips at about that rate, and that's all it takes to, over a couple of hours, to soak a tree.
Nice.
So we don't actually have to water much.
And let's just take this tree right here, for example. How much does a piece of fruit that comes off a tree like this that you sell to whoever it may be at a farmer's market or a store or a broker, who would, how much would a piece of fruit off this tree sell for in a farmer's market or in a, in a produce in a store?
Well, we don't do a farmer's market, but when we sell to Carolyn, we're selling at $1.25 a pound. And when these size up, these aren't fully sized yet because these are ripening still, so they got a ways to go. But when they do, they're about a third of a pound, so there's three to a pound.
Cool. Tell me, O'Neill?
Yep.
I'm Len Davis with Pangelity Productions. I'm doing some work with New Roots Organics, which is a organic produce delivery system based out of Seattle. I'm up here on Dry Slough Farm on Fur Island near LeConner and Conway, Washington, Mount Vernon area, Skagit River Delta, and we're adjacent to Rainsong Farm with Dennis O'Neill on some of the best farmland in the world. Pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for telling me about your farm.
Oh, you bet.
Take care.
Bye-bye.